What up, HyperChange? Welcome to another episode. Today, we're going to be breaking down a brand new podcast that was an hour and 20 minutes from Elon Musk and Swisher. Swisher works started this new website, sort of tech journalism thing called Recode. She's been in the tech journalism industry for years and years. She's one of the most well-respected journalists out there, and she sat down with Elon Musk on Halloween. The podcast just came out, and I just listened to the whole thing, took a bunch of notes. I thought it was awesome, ton of insight into Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring Company. So I wanted to break it all down with you on the channel. It's going to be sort of like when we do the Tesla earnings call episodes where I just read off my notes. And also, I'm a little bit sick, so try and bear with me here if I mess up something. But anyway, let's get right into it. So the first topic they discuss is Twitter. So Elon says that he loves to tweet things without much of a filter. I guess no real surprise there. But he says he wouldn't really change his Twitter behavior if he had the chance. He spends a lot less time on Twitter than people think, only 10 to 15 minutes a day, which makes a lot of sense. He just fires off a tweet, and he says it's a really great way to communicate, and that Twitter's interesting because it's the flow of consciousness of society, and it's a way to tap into that by checking Twitter. He also says that if there's one thing he had to learn from this whole 420 privatization tweet thing, it's that he shouldn't tweet things that are going to materially impact the stock price during live trading hours. So that is the one takeaway. So I thought that was good that he's not doing that anymore. So I'm gonna say this funny thing of some people use their hair to express themselves. I use Twitter, so we can continue to keep counting on Elon's awesome tweets. Love that. The next thing they discuss is the press. So he's lost a lot of belief in the press. He says, my regard for the press has dropped quite dramatically. They're reporting a lot of things that are untrue. And then he goes on to, make this example. The Wall Street Journal had a front page article just very recently that he said about, the FBI is closing in on Tesla. He just said that's utterly false. How could you even print an article like that? Such a falsehood on the front page of a major newspaper. Why are these people even journalists? And I have to agree with him there. Particularly the Wall Street Journal has been spreading a ton of FUD about Tesla. So I love to see him calling him out there. Then Swisher does an interesting line of hey, look, Elon, don't you think it's a little dangerous to attack the press? That's what Trump's doing. We need journalists in society, and isn't that bad? And Elon says, well, look, the press needs to be honest and truthful, and I'm going to call them out if they're not honest and truthful. We do need the press. We do need journalism. I suggest the press takes this criticism to heart and does better. And he says there are a lot of good journalists out there, but there are a lot of bad journalists as well. And the problem is the feedback loop is inverted. And I totally agree with this. More salacious articles get more clicks, and you're not a journalist, you're an advertising salesman. I love this insight from Elon Musk. And this is something that is I don't know how to solve it, because in the era of, Facebook, Twitter, where people are sharing posts on social media, the more aggressive the headline, the more clicks it's going to get, the more revenue that media company is generating, the more they want to pay and promote journalists who do that kind of thing. So I just think there's a really bad and broken incentive systems for journalists to only report ridiculous things, not the truth. And I love how Elon calls that out. And he says, the truth in what I do, science and engineering, is incredibly important and is paramount. Without the truth, you're never going to learn how to fly a rocket or build a car. And so that's why for him, it's so frustrating to see in the mainstream media so much untruthfulness. The next part is interesting. It's all about the roller coaster year that Elon Musk has had. So Kara says, what has happened this year? And basically Elon says, look, the Model 3 ramp was incredibly difficult. It was an excruciating year for the company. It's incredibly difficult to survive as a car company. He goes, I'm pretty sure I burnt a bunch of neurons running both SpaceX and Tesla. It's incredibly difficult. And then Kara's like, well, why are you doing this? And he goes, it's trivial to start a car company, but it's insanely difficult to make it successful. And this is the advice that I would give to everybody who's getting hyped on Neo Motors, who, Faraday Future, who everyone used to get hyped on, Lucid Motors. I think all these companies, they want to make a splash, and the media is loving them because they're the next Tesla. But what people don't realize is the car business is really, really difficult. I never want to invest in a car company, but the only reason I am is because, I believe Elon Musk is the only person who's the combination of brilliant engineer, software person, and business person who can pull it off simultaneously. I do think we are ripe for disruption. The transport industry is going to change more in the next 10 years than in the next 100. So I do see a huge opportunity for this amazing car brand and company to be built, or mobility company to be built in the 21st century. That's why I'm betting on Tesla. But in general, building cars is a really, really hard business. And that's why I'm super bearish. I mean, there's other companies out here like Rivian, which is like this stealth startup in Detroit that's gaining a bunch of hype. Arcimoto, the other electric vehicle company that just IPO, that's a microcap. I just don't like any of those businesses because it's so capital intensive and it's so difficult. And they go more and more into that. And then, Kara Swisher says, so what was it about this year? Like, why was there so much pressure on you? And he goes, it sounds like you're not hearing me. And you can tell Elon gets a little bit frustrated here because he's saying, like, really, like, making a car company is monumentally difficult if you want to make it successful. Many attempts to do it have all failed, even with a strong customer base, a whole dealer and service network, even with the factories already built, they still went bankrupt. The only two car companies that have never gone bankrupt in American history are Ford and Tesla. They both were hung on by the skin of their teeth in the last recession. And he says even there's a good chance Ford goes bankrupt in the next recession. I could not agree with that more. I think Ford is absolutely done when Tesla releases the pickup, maybe even before then. But anyway, he says a startup car company is harder than an entrenched brand. It's absurd that Tesla is alive. It took excruciating effort, hundreds of hours of weeks from everybody who worked at Tesla to make the company successful. There was not another way to do this. So really just Elon's on one about this, but I just don't think people appreciate how difficult what he has achieved with Tesla is, and that's why I just give him so much credibility. And so then Kara says, why do you push yourself that hard? And he goes, otherwise Tesla dies. Tesla cannot die. Tesla is incredibly important about the future of sustainable transport and energy. The success of Tesla is by far the biggest forcing function to get other car companies to go to electric vehicles. It's very important for all life on Earth, no matter where you are, no matter what your religion is, for the future of the world. If we do not survive and fix this problem of the fact that we're destroying the natural environment at an accelerating pace, if we do not hyperchange our impact on the natural world, we are all doomed. And so I love that, just reality check that Elon gives of like, this isn't a game. This isn't just to make money. This is like, we are polluting. Nobody's caring. And nobody would have changed the way the trajectory of the automotive and transport industry was going if it wasn't for Tesla. That is why I'm so passionate about the company. That's why I think this is the most important company on earth, because they have catalyzed this transition. And he goes on to say, like, it blows my mind that you have all these social justice warriors driving around in diesel cars, and then he calls out Kara Swisher, do you have an electric vehicle? And she goes, no, I don't, but I never drive. I also want to give, maybe kind of throwing my cousin under the bus here, but I just saw my cousin recently and he's like super into environmentalism and, he's like always grilling me for not turning off the lights enough and like saving energy. And then I was asking about his investments, and the one investment he made was in Eni, the Italian or Eni or something like that, the Italian oil company. And I'm just like, what? Like, the one thing you're choosing to do with your capital is give it to a company that's leverage it, like ruining the natural world, probably taking huge advantage of impoverished countries and communities to wipe out their natural resources and then burn these fossil fuels. Like, I just don't think people are, think holistically on a systems approach about what they're doing. And so that's why Tesla is so important. But anyway, I was getting a little sidetracked. But the point being, he goes, without Tesla, there would still be a transition to sustainable energy eventually, but it might be 10 or 20 years slower. And that could be the difference that really screws us. And so he already says that Tesla, it's fair to say, has advanced sustainable energy by 5 years conservatively, and closer to 10 actually already. And it could be 20 if we keep executing, and that'll be the difference that changes the trajectory of the carbon emissions of society and therefore dramatically reduces the impact of climate change going forward. And so super inspiring. And that's why, just the fact that Tesla's seen so much success in the past 5 years or so since I've been following it, the Model 3 is selling so well, that's just got to make you feel good inside, because that is an inflection point in the auto industry that was not on track to happen without the company. And then Carr goes on, what about a toll on you? And he says, this was terrible. This year felt like 5 years of aging, worst year of my career. Why this year of all years? She says, Model 3 production ramp. We had to go in and fix the mistakes of the Model 3 production system, and there were a bunch of them. Personally solved them. Jerome solved a bunch of them, which is Jerome Guillen, who then was promoted to head of automotive. I think his promotion has a ton to do with the fact that he killed it on building the tent assembly line GA4, and that's why he was promoted. But anyway, he says, we even had the legal team delivering cars at the end of Q3. Just love that hustle throughout the entire Tesla community. And then he goes, the thing about manufacturing businesses, the amount of money you lose if you don't solve the ramp is mind-boggling. You get hit from both sides. And then he goes on to make this analogy of in the software industry, you don't have a supply chain, but for any large manufactured item that's complex, you have an incredibly huge supply chain that has 6 months of inertia, he says. And I love this explanation. He goes, you place your orders for parts of cars. We have 10,000 suppliers. We're placing the orders with them 6 months in advance for final assembly. If you don't make those cars, you still have all the costs. the inertia of that is incredible. If anything happens to stall the production process, then you can't make those cars. You only need one missing thing to hold it all up. And so that's where there was so much pressure on the ramp, because they had already committed to all this supply chain. They needed to make it work. And that was a reason behind production hell. So that was amazing insight there. She also says, do you regret things you've done to slow down the mission of Tesla? Great question by Kara Swisher here. Some of your tweets, what about the self-inflicted pain? And then Elon's like, yes, there's no question I did some things that were self-inflicted that hurt Tesla, and even makes a joke like his brother Kimball Musk said, if you do a self-inflicted wound, can you not at least twist the knife afterward? And I thought that was a great little summary. So huge shout out to Kimball for G-checking Elon. Good stuff, Kimball. Anyway, so she goes, why do you do that? And he goes like, look, it's not intentional. I'm under a ton of pressure. I'm not getting a lot of sleep. People make mistakes. And then Kara goes, is that over? And then he jokes and goes, totally. I'm never making another mistake in my life. So I thought that was funny. And then he goes, I'm back to a tough work schedule, but not the hardest work schedule ever. I was working 120-hour weeks. Now we're down to 80 or 90. And he says this interesting tidbit that the pain function of how much you're working goes up exponentially after 80 hours per week. Then they go into Tesla. This is the part that, of course, I love. I mean, they already talked about Tesla, but this next part was all about it. And so he says that, Tesla's going pretty well right now. We're not staring death in the face. We can't be complacent. But until September, it was looking like we could die at any minute. And we had to solve the production ramp. We were constantly on the cusp of staring death in the face. And I just want to say that for all the people who may get freaked out of oh my God, Tesla was on the verge of failing, I kind of, and there was a lot of pressure, but I also think this is Elon's mentality of over worrying, and that I think is very good in a CEO. And that's why he puts so much pressure on his team, because he really seriously takes if we don't solve this, we could go bankrupt, and that we can't go bankrupt because Tesla's such an important company. And so interesting stuff there. And then he goes, we're over the production hump. Making 5,000 Model 3s a week is no big deal. We're going to scale that to 6,000, then 7,000 with costs under control. We could do 6,500 Model 3s a week now, but it would be a lot of overtime, and so it wouldn't be efficient. And he also goes on to say that we have no model year like other car companies. As soon as we get an improvement, we roll it into production. And this is something I've talked to big money shorts about, and they always make this joke of oh, the Model S is the same as 2012. It hasn't changed. There's no model years for Tesla. There's zero innovation. It's been on the market for 6 months. That is just totally ignoring what Tesla's doing in their products. They come up with technology, they integrate it into their cars immediately. I mean, it's just a totally different philosophy than holding back your improvements until putting them into the cars. There's just a delay of innovation towards getting to the consumer for every other car company that Tesla does not have because of this philosophy. I love it. So I think that's a really good insight there. Additionally, he says, we're super stoked about this new feature, Navigate on Autopilot. You can go from highway on-ramp to off-ramp, changing lanes, overtaking cars, integrating navigation with autopilot capabilities. And then they start talking about self-driving. Kara goes, what's the challenge here? He says, improving the neural net to detect all types of objects from the 8 cameras. They're essentially running 8 neural nets at the same time from all those cameras around the Tesla. The biggest challenge part of this is solving all of the unique corner cases. Now they're integrating stop signs and traffic lights next. And then one thing I wanted to highlight here that wasn't in the interview is the reason why I think Tesla is a leader in self-driving is because Tesla's, if you talk to a Tesla customer, they probably use autopilot almost all the time. So Tesla's, driver assist features, whatever you want to call it, this technology that makes it so you have to do less, is already moving the needle on a huge way for the consumer experience of their products. So they're already integrating self-driving technology into their consumer experience, and it's already moving the needle on customer happiness. And this is super important. Name another car brand that sees such a high uptake and adoption of its self-driving features. You can't, because Tesla's the best at it. I think this is a really important clue about who's winning the self-driving race. And there's more things here where they go into, you need to be better than a human driver. The AI needs to be better than a human driver. Eyes are basically just cameras. All creatures on Earth navigate with just cameras. We all have eyes. And then he goes on to say, image recognition neural nets can be superhuman with just cameras, basically saying we don't need LiDAR. And then he kind of does a little jab at Waymo, saying it's easy to make a solution for self-driving in one city on certain roads and certain weather conditions. But what you really need is a general solution. You can just press a button no matter where you are in the world, no matter what road you're on, the car can drive itself. And that is what he believes Tesla is far, far ahead at. And they also talk a little bit about regulators here, saying that the regulators are not going to approve this until there's billions of miles of data proving with statistical significance that the autopilot cars or self-driving cars are much, much safer. And he thinks that the US and China are actually going to be pretty good at, handling this and being early adopters of allowing self-driving cars on the road. In terms of the competitive landscape, he says he doesn't really think about competitors at all. He just thinks about how do we make the best cars? How do we make our cars as good as possible? How do we make sure we have the best manufacturing and engineering talent? This is sounding like Jeff Bezos. This is why I compare Tesla to Amazon, because they have a mentality of the customer is the first thing we focus on. We don't care about what the competition's doing. This is a mindset that seems simple, but is incredibly rare in today's capitalism, and almost no other car company thinks like this. They're basing their improvements and product on competitors and incrementalism, not any focus on the customer. And I think that's why Tesla's winning. That's why the Model 3 is the best selling car in terms of revenue in the country. And so he does, says Tesla does no advertising, no paid endorsements. We rely on the quality of the product to sell. That's why it makes no sense to put our budget into advertising. We want to make the best cars. And if you're watching this YouTube video, there's a good chance you probably saw an ad for a car company that's not Tesla before you even saw the video. And that just goes to show, you watch TV, almost every ad in the football games is for car companies. So those are all wasted dollars that aren't going into making you a better car. They're going into just trying to convince you to buy their car with a cool sound or cool video. And so I just think I would want to invest in a company that's actually building, spending their money to build technology in their products, not that's just trying to convince me with subliminal marketing to buy them. So that's another thing why I think Tesla just has such a better mindset. Who's the closest competing to Tesla? Is it Waymo? Is it Ford? Is it Mercedes? Elon says, I think Waymo is probably the closest with self-driving, but once again, he says, it's easier to make a citywide solution and just do it on a case-by-case basis. To really have self-driving cars take off, you're going to need a general solution, and Tesla is ahead. And he says, to my knowledge, no one is likely to achieve a general solution first before Tesla. This would be huge. Imagine if Tesla can operate a fleet of robotic taxis, the Tesla network, with no drivers in them, and while every other car company that's operating a taxi network has to have a driver. That is a cost advantage. Tesla could offer rides for a half or a third of the price and make way bigger margins. This would totally, imagine getting an Uber that would usually cost you $20 for $7, and Tesla's making $3 in profit on that $7, while Uber's only making $2 in profit on that $20. I mean, this just flips the economics of transport on its head. If Tesla can really achieve a general solution of autonomy before anyone else, this is a hundred. And then once you have the full self-driving solution, your neural nets are only improving. It gets harder and harder to catch up by the day. I mean, it's almost like Tesla's vehicle business right now is just a Trojan horse to build the technology for a self-driving robotic taxi network that will be a first mover. And I think that, ARC Research, other, bullish Tesla analysts have said this is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity to revolutionize transport. And I truly believe that. And I cannot understate that if Tesla is the first mover, this will be a mind-boggling business opportunity for the company. But we can get more on that later. And then he also says, Tesla, I would be very surprised if any car company beats Tesla because it's the software problem. The car companies suck at software. Software is eating the world. Tesla, I call it a tech company because they're really good at software. Everything that runs on tech in the modern world needs good software. Tesla's the best at that, and that's why they're winning. Additionally, the hardware. There's a hardware problem with self-driving. You need a hardware. He says there's a compute problem with the hardware, and no other car maker is doing anything. In the meantime, Tesla is building their own custom AI hardware 3 chip. That is why, in my opinion, they're putting all their guys like Pete Bannon from their chip team on the conference call to explain it. This is a not so subtle hint of just how important this technology development is for Tesla. Additionally, he says the hardware 3 will roll out next year, that this chip they've been working on is going to be 10 times better than the best solution at the same price point with the same power consumption on the market. Mic drop. Thought that was dope. I think they'll achieve it. Some people have said NVIDIA is coming out with a chip that's going to be just as good at Tesla's, but we'll see. Also, he says, Kerr goes on to say, where do you get the money? Does not having enough capital hurt you? And then Elon says, as I said earlier, we'll be cash flow positive all quarters going forward. We don't need more investment. We don't want to raise money. Then they start talking about the privatization. Do you need to go private? Elon says, we could execute better for private. And he says, I don't want to talk about the short sellers. I only think about them 1% of the time. But I will say there's a group of smart people who are incentivized to bring down Tesla at every single turn, to magnify every piece of bad news. And I agree with him. And that, doesn't help the company at all. And so he thought, when we wanted to go private, I was like, if we go private now, there'll be a short-term pain, but in the long run, over, the next 5 years, if Tesla, let's say, went private and then it went public 5 years later, in the longer run, they would avoid a ton of pain throughout this difficult point in the company. And so I thought this was really key insight into that whole 420 privatization tweet. They briefly mentioned the supersonic VTOL jet idea that Elon's had. He said, my head would explode if I tried to do that right now, but I've been thinking about a supersonic jet idea for about 9 years. I even wrote some of it down. Anyway, let's talk about Tesla's real product pipeline. And he says that we have the most exciting product pipeline of any company on the planet. And yeah, I actually bought more Tesla today, like right as I heard this part of the interview. I'm going to make another episode about why I did that later. But this just gets me so excited, man. Like, Tesla is so early and executed its business model. And so he goes through, we have the Model Y, the SUV version of the Model 3 that's coming out. We're coming out with the semi-truck, which is the heaviest class of industrial truck. We're coming out with the Roadster, which is going to be the fastest sports car in every single dimension, acceleration, top speed. It's going to get rid of the halo effect that fossil fuels cars have, because it's going to prove that electric cars and the technology behind them is better in every single way. Then he goes on to talk about the pickup truck, which he says he is most excited about, that it's going to be a super futuristic cyberpunk Blade Runner design, going to be heart-stopping. He even says, like, I don't even know if that many people are going to buy it. Like, I'm working with Franz on this crazy design. I honestly don't care if that many people like the design or not. Then he's kind of like joking, just like, I want to make this design because it looks so badass. If it doesn't take off, then we're going to make it a more standardized version of the pickup truck, because eventually we need to replace all pickup trucks with electric ones. So we're going to do that. But I love how Elon just still has this sort of like artistic inventor streak in him of like, this is what I think the future should look like, even though it's weird and different, and this is what we're going to build. And so I love that forward-thinking personality. He even says, like, people will want to buy it even if they don't need a pickup truck, and I totally believe that, and I think this is good. Like, now I'm more excited about the pickup truck than any product in Tesla's pipeline. I even tweeted, I was like, Elon, when you drop the Model Y in early 2019, do a one more thing, Apple-esque thing, and unveil the pickup. That would be so epic, so I hope that happens. She asked him about a motorcycle. They get a little sidetracked. He said, like, I almost died on a motorcycle when I was 17. I used to love them, but for that reason, they're just not safe. We're not going to make motorcycles. So there you go. He also says, in terms of the solar tile roof, we're almost done with development on a few hundred roofs. You don't even realize it's solar. It looks beautiful. You guys, if you're watching HyperChange, all know about the solar roof. I mean, I think this product is going to be a multi-billion-dollar game changer for the residential solar industry, but it's just taking a while to perfect it, and that's fine. Tesla has this mentality of, we don't want to sell a shit product, and I think that's good. I would way rather it's 2 years later to hit the market than I thought for this solar roof, if that's what it takes to get the product where it needs to be, to really make you as a customer have it, and to really be a product that reduces your works, to really be a product that works and can take you off the grid. So I think it's still coming, and I think all the shorts and all the skeptics are like, oh, what about the solar roof? Forgot about that. It's like, it's still coming. It's just a little bit delayed. And so this is all the same people who said the Model 3, not coming, and where we are now, the best-selling car in America by revenue. So, take your chances on betting that Elon Musk isn't going to come out with that. Go for it. Anyway, he also goes on to talk about the power pack, the power wall, the whole battery business. And then he even says we have a large product on stationary storage that will be very compelling for utility customers. This is a new hint that we're going to get a new battery product from the utility division of Tesla Energy. I mean, I hadn't heard about this until now. And so, is it going to be the Mega Pack? I think it should be called the Giga Pack. And so, I don't know, that's going to be epic. And so, I can't wait to hear more about that in the future. And then they say, what about planes? No plans to make planes at Tesla, says Elon. I think that's lame. Tesla, make planes just in 10 years. Do it. Come on. Anyway, SpaceX. The next part is all about SpaceX. So, what are some of the things you're doing? Elon says it was a great year for SpaceX. We launched the Falcon Heavy, which has twice the thrust of the most powerful rocket in the world. We launched my Tesla Roadster into orbit, which was, the Starman thing. Amazing marketing for Tesla. I love that. It just got people excited about space. We were able to refire a rocket 3 times this year as well. So they reused a rocket for 3 times, which is, awesome. And it's rocket reusability is a key component towards pioneering the space industry, because if rockets are reusable, we greatly reduce the cost of launching them and people and cargo into space, which means that the economic which means it's just easier to do more and more in space if it's cheaper to get there. And so this is like a building block of innovation for the space entrepreneurs of tomorrow, is rocket reusability. So to say they've already refired a rocket 3 times and they continue to improve this technology, huge milestone. Additionally, he says we want to launch astronauts into space. This will be the first time a vehicle from the US launches astronauts into space since 2010 or something. Until then, we've relied on the Russians. And so awesome to see that innovation is coming back to America. And it's kind of lame that the government didn't do it, but I'm stoked SpaceX is doing it. Also, he says, Kara says, what do you think about the Space Force? You know, Trump's whole thing that we should have a Space Force. And Elon, I love how open-minded he is. And with his answer here, he goes, maybe a little controversial, but I think the idea is cool. You know, the Air Force, when we first made that, was thought was ludicrous, and people like, he even says we're poo-pooing the idea, but now the Air Force was looked at as a brilliant must-have, and I think the Space Force will be the same thing, or that's what Elon says. You know, we should have a base on the moon and Mars. You know, it's like a version of our defense system in space will be the Space Force. So I thought that's cool, and like you think of like the U.S. having like a Space Force like in Mars, like I just think that's badass, and it'll be cool if we have that. They're still aiming to go to Mars in 2024, maybe an unmanned mission, maybe a manned mission, but they really want to do this. You can only go to Mars every 2 years, and that's going to be at the spot where they first think it's achievable. So maybe we're going to Mars in just like 6 years. Epic. He talks about NASA, or Kyra asks him about NASA. You know, what do you think about NASA? Is it good or bad? He says, look, I love NASA. They're doing awesome stuff. I actually think we should increase the budget for NASA. You know, going to the moon is one of the most inspiring things that has happened in human history. And, you know, the world, it really brings the world together, and we should try and do more stuff like that. And I love, you know, there's so much negativity in the world, you know, and there's so much like angst, and people are fighting over politics and just everything. I don't know. And I feel that. I'm sure you feel that. And I think a lot of us have this sentiment of like, man, we just need like a cause to rally around, to get excited about and inspired. And going to space, you know, putting all of our effort together to become a multi-planet species could really be a cause that I think is going to inspire the next wave of humanity and the next wave of innovation for humanity. And so I love the way he says that. And I personally think that this is why I'm so bullish on the economy, on the stock market, on just on your opportunity as an individual in this society for the next 50 years, because I think we're going to go from this sort of closed-minded, like, oh, we're all fighting and there's turmoil, to like, wow, like we have achieved so much technologically as a species. We're on the cusp of colonizing other planets. Like, this is a special time to be a human and to be alive and be a part of this. And it's so inspiring. And I think this will bring humanity together unlike ever before. And so that's just epic. And they even ask him about Bezos. You know, what do you think about Bezos is doing with Blue Origin? He says, like, it's awesome that Jeff is putting so much money into rockets. I think there's going to develop some challenges in trying to get past the orbital stage, I guess. I don't know what I'm talking about here, but he says that Jeff will have the resources to get past it. And he thinks that Amazon is an amazing company that has done amazing things. Then we go to the Boring Company, and he goes, Kara frames the question really good, which is like, why are all these rich people doing transportation? And it's like, no matter how much money you have, you're probably still going to get stuck in traffic at some point. And so that's why everybody's trying to solve this problem. And then, you know, Elon does a really in-depth breakdown of the Boring Company's technology, one of the best I've heard. He goes, technically, our first tunnel right now is in Hawthorne. Over time, we want to create a network of tunnels in greater LA. The key is to, you know, that'll be the key to get around the city very, very fast. This whole underground network, you know, he said it a million times, but we got to go 3D with our transport systems. You know, our buildings are 3D, our offices are 3D. Not only are they 3D, but everyone leaves these 3D buildings at the same time, going in and out right before and after work, clogging up these 2D transportation systems. It just doesn't make sense. And then Kara's like, well, oh, what about subways? And then Elon has like, even subways are two-dimensional. And so we really need to get like a deep network of tunnels to solve the transportation system. The problem is, historically, the cost of tunneling has been super prohibitive, and it's been incredibly slow. He says that like there was a 2.5 mile subway extension, I believe in New York, that cost $2 billion. It's about $1 billion to build a mile of subway costs in the US. That is just not scalable. There's a massive opportunity to improve the technology around tunneling. And if you apply a physics first principles approach to engineering, you can find the limits, potentials, and possibilities here. He says he's asked the head of almost all major tunneling companies of like the physics around tunneling and how they thought it could be improved. Are they power limited? Are they thermally limited? Very obvious questions from a physics standpoint. No one knew it. And he says, well, the real answer is they're power limited in how much heat you can transfer from he goes, the real answer is they're power limited, and we're nowhere near the thermal limit, basically saying that like the drill should have so much power behind it that you're worried about that it's going to melt, and then you need to build a cooling system into it. So really interesting here. He says, you know, we're taking rocket and automotive technology, applying it to drilling technology. We're going to massively massively crank up the power of that drill head. Then we're going to cool it. Then we're going to automate the placement of the tunneling reinforcements. Right now, the machine stops to put in reinforcements, so they're basically moving at half speed. And he wants to do that all at once. He says, in general, there's a ton of opportunity after his research for entrepreneurs to get involved in construction. So if you're a young entrepreneur out there, take note. Also, he says that making the drill battery powered is a huge innovation. If you don't do this, you need to have a massive cable behind it that's powering it, massive transformers, massive cable length. It's very slow. It's very costly. Additionally, they're using a diesel locomotive, which is standard practice to transport the tunneling segments to the drill head and the dirt out, which is really weird because with a diesel locomotive in the tunnel, you need to have massive ventilation in the tunnel. And so they have battery powered this same system with the Model 3 powertrain. And this means you're not consuming oxygen in the tunnel and spewing noxious fume, which is a huge improvement, which means the tunnel can be smaller, which means it's cheaper to build, which means it's simpler, and these leading to the cost improvements, which make tunneling way more feasible on an economic perspective, which is why the Boring Company is so exciting. So it's interesting that it ties back to Tesla and that Tesla is actually supplying critical components of the backbone of the innovation of the Boring Company. I actually think that Tesla should acquire the Boring Company and they should become this transportation behemoth because they're already sharing so much technology. But, Elon, if you're watching, maybe that's a good idea. They're planning on opening their first tunnel and having a little party on December 10th, which is epic. And I guess that's going to be in LA. So that's something to look forward to. Additionally, this is about the end of the interview. They talk about Saudi Arabia. What do you think about the Saudis? How do you feel about taking money from them? And he's like, look, the Saudis have been trying to take us private for years. And then Kara Swisher brings up this new political incident where there was a reporter who was, murdered, which is really dark stuff. And Elon's like, yeah, that's not good. We probably wouldn't take money from the Saudis. But he also has this tone that he takes after that, which is like, look, I understand they did something bad, but just because of one bad thing in a country doesn't mean everyone in that country is bad. And you can't paint them with you can't make everybody who is from Saudi Arabia or who lives there look bad just because of one thing the government did. And so I don't know. I think that's just a refreshing way to look at. I think everybody needs that G-check sometimes. And they talk a little bit about AI, nothing really new here. He says that we need to regulate AI. His stance hasn't really changed. He's good friends with Larry Page, thinks he's a great guy, but he still thinks AI needs some, independent regulatory oversight. And he also, they go on to say about, a little tidbit about Apple. They're joking about the AirPods. And then he goes, Apple's great, but I don't think people are excited or lining up that much for what's going to be the iPhone 11. And I guess people do still line up for Apple products a little, but they make products that people love, that are heart stopping. And that's what Tesla wants to do. They want to make products that people love. And I just, that's why I'm so, I don't know. That's why I bought more Tesla today, because I'm like, they have the most exciting product pipeline on the planet, and they're just they have this mentality of if you're gonna buy something and pay more money for it, you should really love it and get excited about it. And we should bring new things to the market that inspire you to think outside the box about what a car is, about what it can do, about how much fun you have when you're in it. And I just love that mentality that Tesla's bringing. And I think that's a mentality, an approach, and a culture that's super hard to replicate. That's a massive competitive advantage for the company. And the last thing is they joke about scooters, and Elon's like, no, scooters are dumb. You look ridiculous on a scooter, Kara. But we might do an electric bike. So I know I just said he's never going to do an electric motorcycle, but they do say they'll do an electric bike. And Electrek has these super cool renderings of what an electric bike could look like from Tesla. They just put out the article. So I think that was really cool. And that's something I never really considered. And I don't get why. If Tesla makes an electric bike, it's probably going to go really, really fast. And so wouldn't that make it just as dangerous as a motorcycle? I don't know. Anyway, but interesting to see. If you have any comments on that, would love to know. But I thought that was super interesting. And so anyway, that wraps up my recap of the interview. This is probably a really long episode, but it was a really long interview. I tried to break it down, give you my insight on all the best points. Please leave all your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a great discussion going. I thought Kara did a really good job at interviewing Elon, honestly. One of my favorite interviews ever, actually, of Elon Musk. And I just love the way that she kind of she doesn't give in, she's not fanboying. She really like digs down on the issues that she wants to hit and will ask really good follow-ups. I think she's an amazing tech journalist. I actually, if I can find it on my phone, I will put, I don't think I can, but like when I was in San Francisco one time at this random cafe, I like saw Kara Swisher outside and like ran into her and like it was like, oh my God, you're Kara Swisher, I'm a huge fan. Like, and I shook her hand and she was like, email me and like maybe I'll let you into our next conference. I did. She never replied to my email, but I still think she's awesome. So thought that was a funny story. And yeah, highly recommend you all listening to this podcast if you want to, because it just is awesome. And I think, and you know, it's investment research. If you're a Tesla shareholder like I am, like understanding your CEO, understanding his mentality, understanding where his head's at, understanding, you know, reading between the lines on his confidence levels is incredibly important way to understand the most important person of the company you're investing in. And so, you know, I think you can never do enough homework on the CEO of the company you're investing in. And that's what I would put this under. And so, love the interview. Huge shout out to Kara Swisher and Elon for doing it. You guys are both awesome. Anyway, this is HyperChange. Huge shout out to all of our Patreon producers and Patreons. Like so much love for you all. If you sign up for the HyperChange Patreon page, you get access to a newsletter I do every single Sunday. It's like 3 pages, single space with tech news, Tesla news, so startup of the week sometimes, whatever I'm scheming on. So definitely want to check that out. Anyway, have an awesome weekend, HyperChangers. I'll see y'all next time. Peace. Oh, P.S. I'm going to make it. So I bought one more share of Tesla today during this interview because like I was so hyped and it just made me so much more bullish on the company. And I'm going to make another episode about that super soon. So stay tuned. It's going to be a good one. Anyway, peace.